Well, we're going to try Leviticus 2, and I've also got Leviticus 3 at the back. So we got 2 lessons here that we might go through because they're real similar. This is the grain offering, chapter 2 is, and the chapter 3 is the peace offering. So we'll kind of go over it. And the peace offering is a lot like the burnt offering, only it's not for the same thing. Verse 1 through 3 of chapter 2 of Leviticus. And when any will offer a meat offering unto the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil upon it, and frankincense thereof. And he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests, and he shall take thereout his handful of the flour thereof, and of the oil thereof, and with the frankincense thereof, and the priest shall burn the memorial of it upon the altar to be an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. So this is, we talked about last week, the bullock, having the bullock for the burnt offering, or the goat, or the turtle doves. And if you're poor enough, or don't have anything, you can give a grain offering. Okay, and that's what this is. And a lot of people didn't have it. Today we're, most of us probably eat meat at least once a day. Some of us more than that. Some of us maybe only 2 or 3 times a week. But over in the foreign countries, a lot of them, they just eat grain of some sort, whether it be rice or corn or barley or wheat, anything like that. That's their staple. Even, we say foreign countries, but even to the south of us. When I was working in the oil field, the Latinos that was out there working, most of them were Latinos that was out there working on the oil wells. First thing they'd do, they'd fire up their little tool house that they got set up over there. They'd have a propane heater in it. They'd fire that up in the morning, throw them some tortillas and start warming them up. And then another guy would get the eggs out. They'd cook eggs, sausage, whatever, and they'd make breakfast right there. Of course, we got started around 7 o'clock, or earlier sometimes. But that's a staple. I mean, the tortilla, the flour, is a staple of a lot of people. And it makes bread, and you can live off bread. It's not very healthy, but you can live off of bread. So a lot of those in the ancient history, that's what they did. They had, very seldom did they have meat. They may have some fruit, like we said before, or some vegetables, or nuts and dates and all that. But this is something that they would bring to, it would be the fine flour. It talks about in one place, fine flour. That means sifted, good grain. Here again, not mealy, not buggy, not anything like that you throw away. The best that you have. And then they want to mix it with some oil and mix it with frankincense. Now, what's frankincense? We always hear that the 3 wise men brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to them. It's actually a resin. I've got some little pieces of, it looks like rock that's resin, and it's one form of it. And if you chip it up and heat it up a little bit, it'll turn liquefy, and it's very aromatic. Smells very good. And that's what they used it for. And when they're doing this, here again, burning something don't smell too good. Even burning flour. Because Darla wakes up in the morning, I'm cooking my toast. Something's burning in there. Yeah, I know. I've got the heater head up a little bit too high.
I have a husband that likes burnt popcorn.
Yeah.
And that smell stays in the house a long time.
Stays for a while, doesn't it? Well, and what do? Usually? You go grab the air freshener. Start making it smell better, Well, that's what this frankincense was. It mix it with it. The oil binds it together, okay? Helps bind it together to make it. Now, the one thing that they said is the priest, when they give it to the priest, they give the offering to the priest, and it does not tell us how much it is. It says a handful. Well, no, it doesn't tell us how much they bring. But it says the priests take a handful of it, and that's what they burn and they use for the grain offering. The rest of it is theirs. So they can take it and they'll bake it and make their food. This is one of the primary, we talked about the hides last year from the cows, from the cattle. But this is one of the primary sources of their payment, okay? And also, we'll learn later on, and we'll see it as we go through Leviticus and Numbers, there's the tithes that people bring, okay? So these are the things that, way it says that this grain offering is suggestive of our service to God. The meal offering was the work of men's hands, of the fruits of the ground, the result of cultivation, manufacture, and preparation, and it was a symbol of service offering. It's something that we're doing for God. It's additional. It's not the burnt offering per se. I mean, it is burnt, and it is used for that, but it's to show our service.
It's the only one that didn't have meat in it.
That's right. That's right. Well, there are some others as we go down. The wine offering and some of that. And we'll talk about that when we get there. It says, grains and things that grow are of necessity and benefit to man, and it is appropriate to honor God with such things. Even the poorest could offer a grain offering, and God wanted to open the door for the poor to bring him offerings. This brought necessary and helpful grain and other products to the priests.
So the grain offering is also called the meat offering?
Well, they call it up here meat, and I think that's just the old King James version of it. It's, and I don't know if it's spelt right. I'd have to go back and look that up. It's part of the burnt offering. Okay, it's a substitute for the meat for those that don't have it. Like I said, sometimes they aren't even rich enough to go buy a dove, a turtle dove for their offering. But that's only required 3 times a year, the burnt offering. This is given anytime. It doesn't tell exactly when you have to bring it. This is a service to God. So it could be done monthly, it could be done weekly, it can be done anytime. It's, again, trying to place on the people there a responsibility to God, that they have to do something for God. Their service, even making their living, they're giving part of that to God. They may not be making, quote, money like we talk about today to pay tithes, but they to pay it with their money. Okay? Do you have that, Leviticus 3?
In the New King James, it says, when anyone offers a grain offering for the Lord,
Yeah, I think that's,
his offering shall be fine flour.
I think it said meat, and that's what I copied out of the King James Version for this, because all this that I do is on the King James Version. I think that's what, it's a grain offering, is what he says. I can't explain why that's in there.
Okay, and I have another question on verse 2.
Yep.
Yeah, it talks about the handful, take out his handful of flour. So was the handful of flour for the priest?
No, for the offering.
The handful was for the offering.
They take out the offering, and the rest went to the priest.
So they could just bring like 1.5 handfuls.
Yeah, they could. They could. And some of these, and I've read through it, but I could never find what, in other places, when they talk about certain offerings, they say half an omer or half a whatever they're.
Or something.
Yeah, something. Here, it's not said, per se, because I think this is, quote, not a required offering. It's a voluntary offering, so what you have. If you have let's go back to the Elijah, when he went to the woman, and I think it's Elijah, maybe it's Elisha. I get the two mixed up. But when he went to the widow and said, what do you have? And she said, well, I got a little bit of flour here and a little bit of wine, and it's enough. We're going to make a little cake, and me and my son's going to die. That's all they had left. And he said, make it for me. Give it to me. That's basically what he said. She's like, boy, what are you coming in, you know? But they did, and then their reserves didn't run out till the famine was over. So that's what I refer back to, and they talk about that in here also, that that's something, it's not required. She could have said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Well, it was an act of faith.
It's an act of faith.
Yeah.
It's an act of service to God.
Yeah.
It's hard for us to understand that time period, so to say, because it's so different than what we have today.
But isn't that how they did trade a lot?
They did. They bartered.
Whatever they had to,
Yeah, they bartered.
you know, go back and forth with.
But we don't see that much today, and we deal so much in absolutes that you go into a store and you don't question the price. You just throw it on the shopping cart and go on, and they charge you the price. In this particular time, you may look at that and say, man, that wheat looks pretty ruddy. I'm going to give you half. And in that story that they showed on The Chosen, when the leper came up and was trying to sell his tools, and they gave him almost 10 shekels or 20 shekels, whatever it was, and he said, man, that cost me, I don't know how many days' wages. And he said, well, that's all I'm going to give. There was no set standard. So you could go from one vendor to the next vendor to the next vendor, and it kind of goes with the law. Later on, it will tell us you have to have fair weights and measures. Do everybody the same. You want to be fair, because otherwise they're not going to be fair to you. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But this is something that they have, that they can give. It is a faith offering for her, and it's a service offering to God. It's to recognize God in this. And later on in page 2, it says Nehemiah 13 and 12 tells us that the tithes of wine, grain, and oil were stored in special rooms at the temple. Now, this is, I would think that if you put oil and frankincense with the grain, that you'd have to use it pretty quick because it's spoiled after a while. Maybe not. I don't know. There's no leaven.
I was reading an article when they maybe you didn't talk about the wine, but they didn't put leaven in it because leaven has a tendency to ferment.
It'll spoil it. That's right.
And so that's one of the reasons for unleavened bread.
It is.
So that it would, like you said, it would last longer.
Lasts a lot longer, and it tells us about that, and I can't remember if it's in chapter 2 here or it's maybe in chapter 3. It tells us don't have any leaven in it. It'll say that just a little bit. I'm going to, well, Brother Epperson, you'll read 4 through 10. That's the next set of verses.
If thou bring an oblation of meat offering, take it, bake it in the oven. It shall be unleavened, cakes of fine flour mingled with oil, or unleavened wafers anointed with oil. If the oblation be meat offering, bake it in a pan. It shall be of fine flour, unleavened, mingled with oil. Thou shalt part it in pieces, and pour oil thereof. It is a meat offering. If the oblation be meat offering, take it in a frying pan, and it shall be made of fine flour with oil. Thou shalt bring the meat offering that is made of these things unto the Lord, and when it is presented unto the priest, he shall bring it to the altar, and the priest shall take it from the meat offering, a memorial thereof, and shall burn it upon the altar. It is an offering made by fire, of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And that which is left of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is a thing most holy of the offering of the Lord, made by fire. If you bring an offering,
And that's it.
okay.
So this is a different type of grain offering. Now we talk about, in the New King James Version, it says grain. And When I say grain, what do you automatically think of? Wheat. Wheat, barley, corn, oats. That's all different types of grain, and there's many other types of grain. One of the things, some people get out of sorts when they talk about grain, because they say, oh, they didn't have corn back then. They didn't have it. Well, the word in Hebrew for grain encompasses all that, because it's whatever they had. Because they said, well, corn wasn't found until South America, like in the 1000 AD or something like that. Well, okay, but how did they get it there in the first place? It wasn't, maybe it's naturally born, it wasn't over here. But it can be whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily mean corn, or doesn't necessarily mean this or that. It's a grain that you can grind and make a bread up out of it.
What they had.
Yes, it's whatever they had. And later, in other parts of it, flour is more costly than barley, because it talks about that. It says barley, you can give 3 measures of barley and only 1 measure of wheat. When it goes on and starts talking about that, because the costs are about the same. You're giving amount-wise about the same amount. So barley is less nutritious than the wheat. So, and then of course oats and all the different grains are in between. In this particular offering though, it's still with the fine flour and the oil, and here it talks about the unleavened flour, if you want to call it. You can do it 3 ways. You can bake it in a pan, okay? And you can, as far as just like a tortilla, or you can put it in an oven. Later on down there, it says, kind of in between, or you can, there's 3 different ways. It's trying to bake it in an oven and baked in a frying pan. You can put a lid on it, kind of cook bread like that. You fry it, or you can bake it in a frying pan, or you can bake it in an oven. That's, I think, the 3 different ways. But all this, again, is something that they give to the priest, and then the priest use part of it, and then the rest of it is left for the priest. Okay, it doesn't specify exactly how much, like it said on the other one.
Okay, so that makes 4 ways that they could do this, right?
And
the first was just you bring the flour, the oil,
unbaked,
and the frankincense, just in these ingredients.
Right.
Then these 3 ways here, you bring it already put together and baked.
Right.
And they cut it in pieces then?
Yeah, it's some of it, and if you can think of it, like we said, unleavened bread, it's going to be more like crackers. Maybe thick, if it's thick. You see them when they saw on the Chosen and other places, like pita bread, they tear it because it's pretty thick, and it'll last. So that's what they do. They tear it apart and they give it as an offering. Now later on, they'll bake the bread and they have a wave offering, and they wave the loaves before the Lord. We'll talk about that later. So that's a little different.
You reckon anything has to do with Christ? I mean, how his body was broken.
It is.
Every one of these offerings.
Yeah.
Even last week, that the animals, they're all cut up.
Right.
I mean, and Jesus was, broken.
And I think part of it being cut up is the priests take part of it, and then the rest. I mean, they offer it, and then the rest is for the Lord. So they're not, and I'm not saying that the person does it. I'm not. I think the priests just look at it and that they try to grab a proportional amount. They think, okay, that's a tenth, or that's a whatever they do. I don't know what it was. They take their portion, their quote handful.
Well, all of this seems to be thankfulness offering.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with atonement, which goes us back to Cain and Abel.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's what I thought also.
That's what comes into my mind.
Yeah, that's it's still given, but like I said, it's a service to God. It's something that you're doing for God, where I think we're starting to understand a little bit about why God refused Cain's
It was his
offering. Right.
It was the way he gave
It was the way he gave it, but it because he said, well, I can give this offering too. I don't know why they said, come give an offering. I don't know why. Maybe his dad said, we need to go have an offering, and you guys go get something. And Abel was tending the flock, and he chose the meat offering.
I was thinking last week, you don't even really know if maybe Adam and Eve maybe, this is the first recorded one.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have done it before, offered up sacrifice.
Oh, I think they did. I think that, and that says in here, if I can find it when we're going through it, it says here that, we don't know exactly when the first one was. We know when the first one was recorded, when they said it was recorded, but we don't know exactly why it got started. But I think, here again, my thinking, since they had the covering that they had to have because they sinned, that was the sacrifice. And maybe God said, okay, because of what you've done, this is what we're going to have to do. You're going to have to make sacrifice. And killed them right in front of them, said, okay, then you go wear these clothes. Make clothes out of these for yourself. We don't know. That's my imagination, but that could have said in mine. And then thereafter they said, okay, I sinned again. I got to go sacrifice it.
Hebrews said there can't be a remission of sin without the shedding of blood.
Right.
Again, like you said,
it talks about the unleavened cakes here. If you want to read through that, in the little dots on 3, it says, Jesus spoke of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the leaven of Herod, by which he meant their doctrines and their philosophy. Paul also spoke of the old leaven of corruption and sin. So this leaven, that's where we get that the leaven or the yeast is it's not bad, but it's a representation of what can happen. And I don't know how it got started. It's kind of like, how do you make sourdough bread? You got to start from somebody's piece of it, or you got to have the yeast to get it started. So I'm sure they had yeast because they said you can't use this in these particular ones. And the leaven of the Pharisees was hypocrisy. It was ritualism without spiritual or moral content. The leaven of the Sadducees was rationalism, and Herodianism is worldliness. And the elimination of the supernatural, Paul speaks of the leaven of malice and wickedness as the opposite of sincerity and truth. Skipping down to 3, it says, if the grain offering is a picture of proper service to God, it's also a reminder that we fall short in serving as we should. We are grateful that Jesus fulfilled the heart and meaning of the grain offering for us as the one who perfectly served God, whose service was never touched with leaven in any way. And that's how they bring that in to Christ. It says, if the grain offering was bought as fine flour or prepared as bread, a portion of the priest went to the priest for their provision. And we talked about that before. Let's see. Iris, can you read 11 for us? It's on page 4, right in the middle.
No meat offering which ye shall bring unto the Lord shall be made with leaven, for ye shall burn no leaven, nor any honey in any offering of the Lord made by fire.
Okay. One of the things that this brings out, if you go and read this, the leaven or the yeast, it's fermenting. It's changing the bread. It's making it rise. It's making it take on a different consistency than what it was before. They also used, they said, the leaven, and it mentions the honey in the sacrifices of the people around them. the Canaanites and all the people that was in Palestine. How they know that, I don't know, but that's what they said, that was used. And they're trying to get them away. God is trying to shun them away from the practices that was done, like we said. And that's why the blood's drained from the cows and the goats and all that, because in the pagan, they would even drink the blood, some of them, during the sacrifices that they would do. So, and the honey is both from bees and a kind of concentrated fruit syrup, it says, the word honey. It's on the next page, page 5. One reason God did not want honey in the sacrifice was to teach us that God's worship is not to be governed by men's fancies and appetites. Honey's sweet. And I don't like that, so they put a little honey on it. I'll eat that. Like my mom always said, Daniel said, one time they asked him if he wanted to eat some fried apples. He said, sure I will. He said, oh, Grandma, make it. Anything that you put sugar on it and fry it up, it's got to be good. Because you know it's going to be sweet. And that's, pretty much true. And I think I told you last week I made a green tomato pie. Did I tell you that last week? Yeah. I did say I was going to make it. I did make it. Tastes like apple pie. It does.
Green tomatoes?
Green tomatoes. Because if you put a cup of brown sugar with it and mix it in, that's the way the recipe called. But you slice it like you do apples, thin, so it has that kind of, you can texture in your mouth, you're kind of biting on crunches of it, not crunches, but pieces of it, you see. And yeah, it tastes to me it tastes just like, and Darla said too. Yeah, if you didn't know it, if you wasn't watching when you was eating it, you could see, because it's got a tomato look to it. But yeah, it was real good. We only had about a fourth of it left, so we can eat it all. Pretty good.
Got green tomatoes.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to get rid of some of mine. A green tomato pie, and I got a few more. I was going to try the green tomato bread.
You know what we can ask him to try.
Yeah. So, but it's easy. Just wash them off, slice them thin, put them in there, and mix it with that other stuff. It says, no leaven, the symbol of the rising pride and self, for leaven. No honey, that which is merely attractive and sensuous, because the only really people that had honey that much was pretty rich people, unless you found it, wild out there. Verse 12, Bertha?
In the middle of the page.
Mm-hmm.
As for the
Oblation.
obligation of the first fruits, you shall offer them unto the Lord, but they shall not be burned on the altar for a sweet savor. As for the offering of the first fruits,
That's just the
the
description
best
there.
of the.
You don't have to read that.
Pardon?
You don't have to read that. That's not part of the verse.
Oh.
Here again, it talks about the first fruits of the harvest. Anytime they're going through the harvest, they want the first of everything, whether it be grain or whatever fruit that you might have. Could be grain, could be vegetables, could be anything. You have nuts, dates, anything. Say they were never, the first fruits, this particular offering was never burnt on the offering, but it offered in a different procedure. We don't know exactly what it was, but it says they shall not be burned. God had a different procedure for the offering of the first fruits than it described in what we've already read. Well, it's in 16 here. We'll talk a little bit about it. It says 14 and 16. Verse 3, or verse 13, excuse me, Harold, you want to read that one?
And every obligation of thy meat offering shalt thou season with salt, neither shalt thou suffer the salt of the covenant of thy God to be lacking from thy meat offering. With all thine offerings thou shalt offer salt. Okay.
Salt's an important part of the offering because it spoke of the purity or preserving. It's also expensive that particular time because it could preserve the meat, could preserve a lot of different things. It says as preservative, salt will slow or virtually stop the normal process of rot in meat. It is also the nature of flesh to spoil, but salt-cured meats stay good. I remember grandpa's smokehouse back there, where he'd either smoke it or salt it. You know, he'd have meats hanging up in there, and it's like people see that today, they'd have a heart attack. You know, here in the U.S. You know, we're foreign countries, I think they still do that per se. Said it was once said that once you'd eaten a man's salt, you were his friend for life. God wanted every sacrifice to be a reminder of a relationship. A lot of times they had a covenant of salt where they would each take a little bit of salt, and that made them friends. So it's just like, okay, you're committing to me. This is what's going to happen. Previously, God commanded that the sacrifice should not contain honey. The command to include salt and exclude honey means God wants the sincerity of our service, not things that can be made artificially sweet. There is a kind of molasses godliness which I can never stomach. That's from Spurgeon. And what he's saying is that, have you ever met a person that they're too sweet to...
Syrupy sweet.
Well, yeah, they come on, and you can sit there and watch them, and over here they're chewing somebody out, and then they meet somebody over here at the door, and they're just as sweet as somebody. It's like, that don't correspond. You know, they don't quite. There's something not right there, and that's what it's saying. You can't have both. You got to be.
That's a split personality.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people do that. I mean, when they want to impress somebody, they'll turn on the quote charm. You know, that's just the way it is. Jesus spoke down at the bottom of the sea. Jesus spoke of the idea of salt and sacrifice in Mark 9:49-50. He said that people, as living sacrifices to God, must be seasoned with fire and with salt. And here's the things that we talked about before with salt. All the offerings in here, the inclusion of salt with all the offerings speaks to the way we should serve God. To remember the covenant, to remember the fellowship, to remember sincerity, to remember purity. And that's what the Levites or the Jews were at that particular time.
Okay, now the salt was only for the
Grain,
it's
the
called
grain.
meat offering.
Yeah, but it's a grain offering.
The meal offering or whatever.
Yeah.
In other words, the salt was not to be used on the burnt.
Didn't say anything about it. Now, up here it says all the offerings, but I think it's just talking about what we're talking about here, and that's the meat offerings. Now there is and I've been reading in Exodus. I just happened to be in Exodus during my Bible readings, and I noticed some things that I didn't notice before. I probably read them, but didn't realize it. And God was telling Moses, write this down, blah, 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 and build the altar, or build the bronze altar, or the whatever he's talking about, according to the way I told you in the mountain. So evidently, he got into very big detail in the mountain, and may have even shown him what he, through visions or something, what he wanted to be able to do some of these things. I just thought that was, so sometimes we wonder, how did Noah know how to make the ark? Well, same way God showed him and may have given him a vision. This is what's going to look like. This wide, this high. You know, we don't have those specifics. We do on the measurements, but some of these things, we don't exactly know what it was, but we know what was told, and then we see that God told Moses. He spoke it to him, and he knew it, what he needed to do, as far as how to build it. And I think that's a lot of this too. He's telling him these offerings because he has to go and tell the priests, this is how you're going to do this. You're going to take a handful of this, do that. The rest of it's going to be yours. You can use it for your daily bread, or, you know, all these things that's going through. But we don't have that exactly down. It tells us it's for the priest's service. So we don't know what else it might be talked about. 14-16, Sister Janet.
And if thou offer a meat offering of thy first fruits unto the Lord, thou shalt offer the meat offerings of thy first fruits, green ears of corn, dried by the fire, even corn beaten out of full ears. And thou shalt put oil upon it, and lay frankincense thereon. It is a meat offering. And the priest shall burn the memorial of it, part of the beaten corn thereof, and part of the oil thereof, and with all the frankincense thereof. It is an offering made by fire unto the Lord.
Okay. The first fruits, still talking about the first fruits, continuing on from that. Because some of the corn they would gather and it would be green, I guess. And it's talking about here. Now we don't do that. We usually wait until it ripens up in the husk. I don't know if we're talking about the same vegetable that they had back then. I'm assuming so. But I wouldn't want to eat green corn. Of course, I didn't know I didn't want to eat green tomatoes either. I'm just not a fried green tomato person. But yeah, some people are, but I'm not.
Well, it does say full ears,
Right.
and you always hear corn.
Mm-hmm. And I think they, it says to beat it out. So get all the kernels off of it and take it for an offering. So it's eligible too as this grain offering.
Well, maybe the reason it says, thou shalt offer for the meat offering of thy first fruits green ears of corn. Well, the outside is green.
Yeah,
The part you
husk.
shuck off.
Yeah. And that could be. It could be. But it's the very same as what they said on the wheat. It's still the whatever grain or corn, and then the frankincense, and then the oil. It's with it. So it's repeated again and again. So it's giving them another portion. It's just this is the idea of first fruits.
Another grain.
It is another grain, yeah. And shall burn the portion. It seems that none of the first fruits offering were kept by the priests, but all of it was burned to thank God, to honor God, and to declare. So this first fruits evidently was a little bit different, that they didn't keep any of it. It's really all of number 1, chapter
And
2.
it does.
If it didn't yield enough.
Hmm?
I registered it to that it's risky for the first to be given to God first fruits.
Oh, yeah.
Because it may not produce enough.
It may not be, yeah, it may not. And your harvest may get hail and wipe it all out and you don't have anything. It was risky for them. But it's an offering. It's like giving the first fruits of your tithe. You give your tithe, and a lot of people say, I can't make it on 90%, so they don't give their tithe. Well, that's not what God said to do. He will bless that 90% and give you enough to make
But if
do with it.
a storm, for instance, wipes it out,
Mm-hmm.
but if there's nothing,
Mm-hmm.
how do they give an offering to God?
Well, you can't. If you don't have it, you can't give it.
So he forgives that.
But, well, I don't say, you still have to go do something. You're going to live, so you have to go barter. Maybe you're going to, because you don't have any money, you're going to work in somebody else's field to get food. Because you have to have food for the year.
Yeah.
Well, also in verse 14, there at the very last, it says, even corn beaten out of full ears.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to be, complete and ripe.
Yeah.
I mean, ready to go. Ready to be
Here
picked.
again, I'm not sure what green corn means. The green
Well,
ears.
I think they just meant that corn, when you get corn like from the store,
Yeah,
corn on the cob, I
Right.
mean, it has that green outer,
it could be.
leaves on there.
It could be.
Now it says, God was delighted with the green heads of grain, to signify that God should be served with the first fruits of our age, the primrose of our childhood. To me, God wants the best
Mm-hmm.
in the first,
Right,
not our leftovers.
right.
I'm not young anymore, but He still wants my best.
If you pull that off and you see a bunch of worms, you're not going to give that. You're going to throw it away, because most time you can cut off that portion and still use them. That's what we always did, cut off and use what was left. But that's not, you want full to give the full thing. So you find good ears in that first group to give. That's kind of what I get from it. Well, we're a quarter till. Do you want to do 3 or do you want to hold it till next week?
We won't get it all done.
No, we won't hold to get it all done, but what's your pleasure?
To me, I think we can just hold it till next.
Okay, we can do that. It's a lot. The peace offering is a lot like the burnt offering. So we'll just wait. There's got a lot of things in it because it's a little different. So.
Talking about offerings, you said this Sunday you was going to take
It's our world mission offering.
so
What-
we make our check to Tulsa Family Church
Yes.
for it?
Yeah, we'll make one check out and send it to port headquarters
Okay.
with our report at the end of the month. So they do that in March and in October. They have a world